Okay, hello and welcome to episode 19 of Dano Says So. Like always, or like as often as I can, early in this podcasting attempt of mine, I get a hold of people I've known for a long time and whose judgment I trust. Today's guest is no exception. Richie Birkenhead and I go back 33 years. He'll be well known to a lot of the people on this as the frontman of Underdog and of Into Another. We met during his time in Youth of Today, which was a bit of an adventure for both of us, I think. Richie Birkenhead, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to see your face. And
likewise, sir.
Hear your voice. I've missed you over the years.
Mm-hmm. Both of us doing the 4 eyes and furry thing.
I was wondering how many of your guests are bespectacled and hirsute.
More, I think more. I think more are girthy and blind than I would have expected. I think my favorite, as far as how he's aged, though, is Pete from Verbal Assault.
Yeah. Oh my God, amazing. I love his head of hair so much.
He's got the Hunter S. Thompson, Bernie Sanders combo to like a Mortal Kombat character down perfect.
He's just amazing. He's amazing. Yeah in my case, it's anything I can do to obscure the hideousness.
There you go.
But yeah, no, Pete remains to this day one of my favorite people on the planet.
Absolutely. Just a good guy.
Hilarious, talented, kind.
Absolutely. Before we jump into so much of the shared mileage, I know a little bit through conversations when we were young, a little bit through side references on your part, and a little bit through your social networks. But can you tell me a little bit about your background and about your parents?
Wow. Oh, wow. We're going straight there.
I tend to think it informs a person's creativity more than some folks would understand.
Sure. I mean, I grew up in a very strange environment, and it was simultaneously wonderful and horrible often. I don't know. In a nutshell, very close with my mother, who's not only a creative genius and who really sort of nurtured my love of the written and spoken and sung word and opened my ears and my mind and my heart to a very, very broad spectrum of music from a very early age. I remain very close with her. I remain long alienated from my father, who's barely alive at this point, but he essentially, to sum him up, a brilliant college professor and also was involved in theater production. But he's basically Jack Nicholson in the sort of latter part of The Shining, especially the last like 10 minutes or so. That's my dad.
That's like descriptive.
Complete with but in addition to the axes, which there was some of that, lots of firearms as well.
The thing is,
pointed at me. Yeah.
I did not know that about your father, and I knew that your mother's artistic work clearly left its mark on you. Could you tell me a little bit more about what she does and has done?
She's a lyricist. She happens to also be a brilliant composer, but she, writing lyrics is what she fell into as for a career. She started in children's television, where oddly enough I started singing. Nepotism, I was singing very badly at age 5. And then in the late 70s, she started writing Broadway musicals and other things. And she's done other stuff. She's an adjunct professor at Juilliard and in the drama department. And she also does a lot of like pro bono stuff for charitable organizations. Before COVID hit, she had 3 musicals in the works and pretty far along, but like everything else that requires a live audience, those are on pause currently, but she's still going. Unsinkable.
It was one of these things that I think the way when your background has ever come up in conversation, not like we all huddle around the campfire and talk about each other's folks, but I do believe telling people I think Richie comes from show folk.
I'm a theater queen. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Well, but what I'm hearing here and what's going to make sense to people in this interview who know your music is singing since 5 helps a lot of things make sense later. Because, for instance, what you were capable of in 1988 vocally and what most of us were capable of in 1988 were two very different animals.
Oh wow.
And, you know.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, but it was, like I said, it was weird. So that was, I mean, that touching on my sort of home life there, but I, from a very early age, you know, wanted to get out of the house and explore like the underbelly or underbellies, plural, of New York, nightlife and subculture, et cetera, et cetera. So started doing that at a very early age. And, which in a circuitous way led me through like neo rockabilly and psychobilly to punk to hardcore.
As a musician or just an attendee in those psychobilly and rockabilly phases?
Both, believe it or not. When I was 15 and still prepubescent, I went through puberty at like age 27. I looked like I was 12 when I was 15, but I was playing shows at the Mud Club and Max's Kansas City and the Peppermint Lounge, and a sort of rockabilly / psychobilly band, and and just going out all the time in New York at a very early age. Going to see the Cramps and the Gun Club. And
that would be really early 80s, because you and I are roughly the same age. That would be, I mean, what was the earliest year you went to a show to? The reason I'm asking is I've developed a fascination with New York music and New York punk, more like Max's Kansas City era and that type of stuff, very late in life. And I'm curious to see how much of it you got to catch a sniff of, even in passing.
Yeah. So the first I mean, I went to concerts from a very early age that weren't punk or new wave or anything underground. I got my first glimpse of live punk music from my older brother, who was going to NYU in the late 70s. And so I got to see CBGB's in 1978 and saw the Ramones, saw Patti Smith. But the first show I went to of my own volition that was a hardcore show was the Bad Brains at Max's in 1981.
That'll leave a mark.
Yeah, and it was crazy. And I had only heard Pay to Come, I think. I had only heard one song. Yeah, I mean, it was, just really momentous occasion, like really visceral experience, completely changed me.
And is it an oversimplification to say that would be why reggae was a welcome ingredient later in Underdog?
Yeah, I mean, I think that although it was, I don't think it was ever like fully consciously done. Yeah, I mean, as far as making hardcore music, although Underdog was a weird sort of hybrid of a few things, but yeah, that was a huge ingredient. I mean,
let's jump right into that, since you scribbled the segue. When we met, you were in Youth of Today, but there was already Underdog mileage, correct? And True Blue mileage. It was essentially an intermission, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was weird. It was sort of like a semi-acrimonious separation.
Yeah.
I was trying to do both bands, which that seemed to really bother some members of Underdog. Mm-hmm. And so when I went on the road with Youth of Today, they were like, fuck it then, we're going to get Carl to sing, and we're going to have a 1987 summer tour too. And who can blame them? And that's cool. It seemed weird for me because I wrote those songs, those Underdog songs, and those, while at that point I wasn't writing like really overtly personal, fruity lyrics like I did later on. It was still kind of weird to have someone else singing those.
The only thing I can say in their defense, and I never really knew any of those guys particularly well, just sort of socially in passing, but we both know that, you didn't go on a 5-week tour in 87, you relocated,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, and I totally get it. And and those, those guys in both bands were and are brothers to me, and I still love all of them very much. but at that time, I don't know why, I thought, why can't I just do both, you know, and
Right.
have my cake and eat it too. But yeah, so Underdog grew out of, well, True Blue was like this very brief name. And that band grew out of a band called the Numbskulls,
I remember that. Yeah.
which, and yeah, it was all kind of weird. Like, so when I first started doing, I was going to hardcore shows for a few years, and then when I wanted to just start playing shows, the first seeds were sown in like '83 of the Numbskulls. And it was a friend of mine named Scott Kleber who went on to play in a sort of post-punk band called Surgery after that. He was going to Syracuse University. I went up there because a friend of his could get like free recording time on some like 8 or 16 track like shitty rig, and we made some demo that was, you know, we pressed like 5 copies, and anyway, that became the Numbskulls, and the Numbskulls slowly morphed into True Blue, and then Underdog.
And the distinction between True Blue and Underdog really being, I mean, was it any of the same material, or is it just or is the similarity simply in that song title?
No, it was a lot. So some Numbskull songs became True Blue / Underdog songs. The difference between True Blue and Underdog is in name only, really.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Underdog, that band, whether it's True Blue or Underdog, formed when Russ left Murphy's Law and joined what was the Numbskulls, which became True Blue.
Okay. So let's talk 1987. I heard Underdog on a cassette tape. I think, you know, the way things work back there, I think Dave Stein gave it to Billy Rubin. Billy Rubin gave it to me during Billy Rubin's East Coast Opus, where he came back looking and dressing different, but also with what chips on his shoulder that I love about him. But anyway, and it stood out amongst a lot of the material he brought me. It was, I mean, I think I got an unmixed version of Can I Say out of that trip. I got a lot of crazy things. But the Underdog stuff that eventually became the 7-inch on New Beginning stood out. And to me was less template than a lot of what I was hearing out of the East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
this might seem a little bit barbed, but then when we met in person, it was when you were playing guitar in a band that is essentially a template creator and a template standard.
Yeah.
And I think somewhat intentionally so. How was that? That must have been an interesting juxtaposition for you.
Sure, yeah, and even then it wasn't lost on me. You know, I was had a very different role in that band. I mean, honestly, I did love the fact that you know, before I was ever in Youth of Today for that album, that tour, I did love the fact that at a time when hardcore needed saving, they came along. And there was so much irony in that. There was so much irony in the fact that this essentially suburban band that was, you know, even though it seems weird that 1985 seemed like eons later than 1983.
Right.
82, you know, 83 being the sort of tail end of that first wave.
Gavin Oglesby and I have that exact conversation constantly. So go on. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I really loved what they were doing, what they represented. I still remember vividly the first time I saw Youth of Today. I was outside New York, and I immediately went up to them and I was like, "You're from Violent Children," and we started talking. We started reminiscing about, you know, shows like Minor Threat and DYS and Negative Approach and all that stuff. But you know, Underdog was we purposely and purposefully placed ourselves on the fringes always, and we never, you know, I never wrote songs to a template, and that was also deliberate. And I sort of I had many chips on my shoulders back then too, and I definitely eschewed the whole like conformity within a non-conformist scene thing. And then with Youth of Today, it was such a different thing. It was almost like, not in a bad way, but almost like pastiche. It was like this love of something that, you know, had come before, this fleeting thing, this like, and trying to keep that alive and keep carrying that flag. And I really ended up in that band more out of my friendship with Purcell and Capo, and like I was really, really close with those guys.
Well, when you guys were at my place in particular, I remember you and John being pretty much inseparable.
Yeah, and we were roommates at that time in New York.
Okay.
He moved into my apartment on Thompson Street in Soho, and we were roommates. And yeah, we were inseparable friends. I mean, around the clock, day in, day out.
I think there's no upside in bullshitting and pretending that during that breakdown the Walls era that I didn't love me some youth of today. I absolutely did. It was a fun time. And yeah, if Purcell left the screen to my house open and my dogs got out, did I hate you today for 20 minutes? Fuck yes, I did. But it was a great thing. The reason I'm bringing this up, this is about you. The two people from that era who I still hold in extremely high regard would be you and Mike Ferraro. And I know I've told you this more than once, but while I have people watching us together, I'm going to share it again. You guys lived with me for months. You developed a strong relationship with my mother, who was not a common woman. She passed away. She passed away about 2 years after you guys left. Mm-hmm. And out of everybody who passed through that household in hardcore, you were the two from the East Coast I heard from, and I will never forget that.
I absolutely adored your mother, and I remember bonding with her immediately. And a lot of that bonding was through Jeopardy. We were both,
Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune.
She and I were just lights out watching Jeopardy. Just didn't matter the subject. We were just like, Wheel of Fortune. I've incredibly fond memories of that time, and I remember not long after hearing of her passing and just being absolutely heartbroken. She was really wonderful.
So after that whole era, after YOT as a briefly West Coast band and forging a lot of relationships, a lot of those guys are tight with the Sloth Crew and so forth to this day. Revelation eventually ended up out here. I would say the net gains for everybody were positives. You went back to, I have some chips on my shoulders, but there are two things. It's a defensiveness about California. I feel like in the following 30 years, there's been a deification of New York that forgets where fucking Bad Religion and Black Flag and the Descendants come from, goddammit. We got to know shit, but then,
I don't. So yeah,
no, I'm talking about for myself. I'm sort of like, talking about some of my own behavior. And then there are business practices, which I think it might be interesting to discuss. Not really from as severe a perspective at either one of our ends as I think people might think. But where I'm going anyway right now is Underdog. The next time I saw you was when Underdog came west. And I think by then, was the Vanishing Point stuff in the can? Demo version or album version?
Yeah, I think demo version was in the can at that point.
Yeah. I remember you sent me that stuff, and you even sent me a master reel to do some songs for a Workshed comp that never happened. And God knows where those ended up in the ether, but they're probably making somebody thousands on eBay. But sort of tell me about that period and about the songwriting then, because it was even further off script. And I think it really raised some eyebrows in a great way.
Yeah. So at that point, I mean, there were a lot of things going on. Obviously, like with any band, the relationships were getting more complex, and I was starting to become a lot more sort of I won't say more politically aware, because I was always quite politically aware, and I was pretty precocious in that regard, but I was starting to be more vocal about how I felt about certain things regarding politics and socioeconomics and lots of other stuff. And I think that may have alienated some people who were in that band with me. And some of the lyrics started to, lyrics about social injustice or imperialism or whatever. And I was allowing just influences from other genres to seep in whenever, and not, I was doing that kind of unapologetically, and I just love music, so whatever felt appropriate, writing a song, I sort of allowed it to happen. I never felt the need. I don't think I ever felt the need with a band that I was sort of where I was the principal like songwriter and front person. I never felt the need to paint within the lines and conform to a genre or a scene.
If I can interrupt real quick, do you ever worry that you went back and you voiced what was going on in your life, but not anybody else in the bands? I have real tyrant guilt as I look back at a lot of my old records. Like, wow, that's a really great 12-song story about Dan. You know?
With Underdog, because that I was the tyrant there. I've always been the tyrant lyrically, but I was the tyrant musically and lyrically with Underdog. I suppose so, but it wasn't because I just wanted to hog the attention or the, I just sort of felt like everyone else was okay with that. But maybe
well, that's the same thing. The material needn't necessarily have been autobiographical. I'm thinking, in my case, I'm thinking of a band of mine that was fairly political, but that you're just really not checking with the troops as you're writing. You're just going.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's guilt so much as I think that's actually what just started to feel a little strange to me. Although, I think that in any band, there's each person plays a role, and I'm not saying there's always a hierarchy and there's always a kind of, leader or anything. But I think that whomever is writing the lyrics, and in some bands, that gets passed around. I mean, it did with the Beatles and the Stones and the Clash and lots of bands. I think that's there. Whomever sings those lyrics, even if it's not the person who wrote them, I think that I don't think that I ever said anything lyrically that the guys on stage with me passionately disagreed with. Certainly.
Right.
I remember I do have sort of vague memories of just like at rehearsals and stuff talking about what a song meant, and just deciphering a lyric if it seemed opaque to people or whatever. But yeah, I kind of know what you mean, but it would be, yeah. I think if all 4 or 5 people in a band have that same just drive to just say something and scream something and sing something, it might get a little weird.
My friend Gavin remains one of my best friends to this day, right? Running in decades and decades and decades now. And in interviews, he will still, without hesitation, tell people that working with me was exhausting. And so I find myself looking back at those years, and that's why I asked it of you, another guy who's been at it even longer. And just you wanted to ask another front person whether they've sensed that in that role, that it's. I do think these are sort of universal happenings in bands, and sometimes they're primary creators, sometimes they're partnerships, there are things. But I just sit back and sometimes I wonder, there have been a few relationships I've had to repair over the years with old bandmates.
Yeah. Do I think that at times I was an insufferable asshole? Sure. I thought you were asking.
Well said in far shorter space than I used.
I thought you were asking specifically about, did it feel weird to sort of.
I was, but I think you more get to the crux of it.
But yeah, I try, I'd like to think I've gotten better at avoiding being that guy these days.
How long was the hang time between Underdog and Into Another? Into Another was a decidedly different audio beast, so I'd kind of like to hear where that came from.
Yeah, so the genesis of Into Another, it's sort of at the tail end of Underdog. And Underdog, we kind of knew it was all, a wrap. In 1989, at the end of a tour that ended in San Francisco, followed by a very short, relatively speaking, drive home where we stopped just for gas. But during the time that I was just feeling just sort of frustrated musically and kind of depressed, I was talking to Drew almost every day. And he and I had throughout the years talked about our love for, for artists and for songs and albums, outside of hardcore and punk. And we shared a lot of common musical interests. And then he and I became roommates shortly after that. I had an apartment into which I invited him to live for. I think he was there. I think we were roommates for at least a year or two. And we basically decided we would just start writing songs, not really knowing where it would go. And by writing songs, I mean either he would come up with just some cool beats or sort of drummers, and I'd write on top of them, or I would bring him a song I'd written, some music and some lyrics, and that would turn into a song. We did, that is the one time where I think I consciously tried to do something, and there was a huge tongue-in-cheek element at first, where Drew and I would try to think of just the kind of musical textures and aesthetics and styles and things, and that would just kind of upset people. Like,
see, the music never upset me. The lyrics sometimes left me really wanting to fuck with you long distance.
I would have welcomed that, but yeah. So I mean, yeah, there were times where I would very consciously channel Rob Halford, almost in a tongue-in-cheek way. Not to say I don't love me some Sad Wings of Destiny or Sin After Sin, but yeah. So, but also that being said, that musically and lyrically, there was never another project of mine where I made myself so vulnerable and expressed myself so honestly and candidly.
At John Bunch Forever, I watched your set, and it occurred to me it was the first time I'd ever seen the band. And wow. I was watching people's reaction. And however tongue-in-cheek some of the execution must be, the way you just wrapped that, the final sentence and the way you were describing the experience, clearly somehow reaches people, because a lot of people there were in the throes of something spiritual watching you guys. And here's smart-ass old Dan in the corner going, who knew? And I think it was a great thing to, I'm trying to make you laugh, yeah, but it was a great thing to witness,
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's a strange animal into another, but I have a lot of love for that project, and I obviously in my twilight years, I relish any chance we get to play, and who knows if that will ever happen again.
You planning on not making it to 65? Is that what I'm hearing here? I mean.
Okay, my late afternoon years.
There we go. So let's get into something that sheds direct light on, and that would be we've both done a fair amount of work on Revelation Records, and we've both done work off of Revelation Records. We've both swung back to support the commemorations of the label and played the shows. What I didn't see coming in 2012, when I was very happy to show my gratitude to Jordan, was that it birthed just kind of a whole nother wave of heavy rev traffic by the same artists playing the same songs. And for years, I had a really adverse reaction to it. I find myself slowly mellowing on it. But how did that hit you? Did you see that coming? Did it surprise you at all? Did you feel compelled to participate at all?
I did feel a desire to participate, but also when that Rev, when that Rev 25 thing happened in 2012, we did kind of, first of all, Drew and I never thought it would be possible that we could do it, because Tony was dead, and we couldn't find Peter Moses anywhere. And then that's a whole separate story.
Both of your California guys are bad men, though.
They're incredible, and I got to tell you, they are brothers through and through, and I love those guys so much. But we did all kind of say, let's not do this unless we're going to make some new music.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's what the fuck is it? What is it other than just sort of like a manifestation of a collective midlife crisis, and trying to glean a little bit of diluted, glory or something. So yeah, so that was the plan from the get-go. Like we would do this if we were really a band and we were going to make some new music. And so we got to work on that.
What it did for me, there was a trippy thing, and then it lit a fire under my ass, and it did have kind of a reactivating effect. I wasn't musically active at the time, right? But I've been musically active pretty much straight through since.
There you go.
But what it also did is had Gavin and I looking at each other going, No for an Answer wasn't our best work, isn't our best work, will never be our best work. And it just made me want to do other stuff. No, it's not the way anybody thinks that band. But the funnest thing about No for an Answer is the infernal sense of humor. And I think that Rev 25 may have been the only time we shared it with the public, with the banner, with the walker, and with the the bent over wheezing merch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
What I think would have been really exciting and what made me pissy, because to me there are only so many venues available and only, frankly, so much sustaining finances to go around in independent music, was that I would like to have seen it ignite that whole squad. I would like to have new music from everybody would have been amazing, under new names, under old names.
I actually was hopeful that is what was going to happen.
Yeah.
That it was going to spark this whole wave of new music from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whether it was with their reunited bands or new projects. I'm glad it did that with you. It's funny, I don't know if I ever...
The least talented and most outspoken of the bunch, He gets back to work.
Stop. Yeah, and the most self-deprecating. But
there we go.
It's funny, going back to 87, I remember before I met you, basically Ray and Purcell describing you, talking about Carrie Nation and everything. And you were described pretty much as like the choke of the West Coast, and just this.
That was a Purcell thing, man.
Just this enforcer, I just pictured this 6'8" guy with like farther than his head and just like, but yeah, your reputation preceded you.
And it was not accurate. I had a temper, but not the tools.
He could twist Pat Dubar into a pretzel.
Dude, Pat Dubar and I butted heads on the internet within the last 2 weeks. I didn't even know he was out there in the ether, and I didn't think it was really him when it happened. And I felt bad because I don't wish anybody any ill at this point in the game. I have a romanticism about certain hardcore ethics and wish everybody would live by my script. But I've kind of started thinking, I look at real world politics and I realize I ain't gonna let anybody tell me how to live there. So I'm not gonna tell my fellow artists how to live here.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah. I have no ill will toward anyone in music at all. I do, and I guess it's a shame our time's running out here. I mean, it's amazing we didn't get into politics, but yeah, that's, hopefully I could be, what Dr. Joyce Brothers was to Johnny Carson, was,
right.
one of his most frequent guests. I could be your Dr. Joyce Brothers.
The plan right now is to finish your episode 19. I'm going to interview Gavin as episode 20. And then I'm taking November and most of December off to learn how to actually do this for real.
Wow.
I took 2 weeks off after the first 10 and jumped right back into it because I was desperate to get right back into it. But now I'm like, so many people have been so kind about giving me their time and their opinions that I really need to learn to showcase this better.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it. I like the backdrop. I guess, you can invest in like a badass DSLR and.
Well, beyond the fact that my equipment sucks and it's busted and I don't have the finances.
But but that's punked,
Yeah, no, I was going to say it kind of works for me, but it's lost on some of my guests, I think. I get a college professor in here who's on Zoom all week long, and we're moving like robots, and I'm looking at his face going, this poor bastard. But you were never a Fender's professor, but
you need a sidekick too. You need like an Ed McMahon. I don't know why I'm using Johnny Carson.
My friend Jeff does that. He's like, Alexia is going to be your or not. No, who was it? I think he said Vic Bondi was going to be my Angie Dickinson and just walk on set periodically.
I love that.
We're getting way off topic here, sir.
I was thinking Greg Brown, but okay.
I don't really speak to Greg Brown much. Orange County is a small and big place. I mean, when we see each other, it's fine, but you haven't been around for a while, Rich. New York.
I know. I should go home and get my fucking shine box.
Yeah. New York.
I know. It's been a while.
In New York in 2020, sir, and New York in 2020 as a father has to have been a hell of experience. An experience, particularly back in the day, back during the phase when Cuomo was on CNN every day with his briefings, and the numbers from New York were horrifying. So tell me what you choose to about this year.
Sure. Well, I will say that then in sort of March, April, May, we spent a few months outside of the city in Westport, Connecticut. But still, yeah.
Because of the pandemic?
Really. Largely, yeah, because I live, I live in a building with, 200 apartments in it, and I live in in a densely populated part of Manhattan. I guess they're all densely populated, but I just felt safer having the kids up there, not having to constantly worry about whether there was going to be an outbreak in my building, and so it was just a place where we could just all spend lots of time with each other and strum guitars and cook together and have some fresh air. But still, it doesn't. I mean, that did nothing to kind of, the pandemic was just sort of another chapter, a really awful chapter in this like dystopian graphic novel we've all been living in since 2016. It's like January of 2016 between the vile buffoon being sworn in and David Bowie dying, and I don't know, just I just feel like since then, up is down and nothing makes sense, and it's just all been relentless. And cavalcade of shit.
Constant escalation. Each new chapter outdoes the last. It's
no, I mean, none of it would be plausible as a screenplay, right? I mean, you go back
at all.
6 years, you'd be laughed out of, summarily laughed out of any big Hollywood studio from this script.
When you came back to the city, has New York changed as much? It's depicted by Trump as being dead and as being a ghost town. But I remember there was this I don't remember what venue it was in, but Jerry Seinfeld had this response to people who were calling New York dead. But I mean, did the city have its ass kicked this year?
It did, but having gone back and forth to like the burbs and to New York, I mean, I have to say that there was that relatively brief period at the beginning where New York's numbers were off the charts because we are an entry hub. I mean, tens of thousands of people from Europe and Asia and all over the world arriving here. It's very hard to get a handle on it, but New York actually did get a handle on it, and we have for a very long time now an incredibly low, sometimes sub 1% infection rate. Even now, while it's surging in many places. So yeah, and Cuomo was awesome. I mean, Trump disparaging New York, it's ridiculous. He's detested by the city, and he's loathed and despised, and we all know he's a carnival barker and an inept clown, and a failure at everything. So, yeah, whatever. The feeling's mutual.
There you go. What is on your musical plate, or is there a musical plate at this point in life?
It's a smorgasbord. It's everything. Okay. I mean, but it always has been. Honestly, it always has been. I mean, when I was touring in hardcore bands, I was listening, to like Joan Baez or like Chopin etudes or, like a chorus line, and also listening to Negative Approach and, rudimentary peni, and like, I mean, yeah, it's everything. It's
I
always everything.
explore more shit that I never listened to before in my life than I ever have during the pandemic. Because I
Oh,
work in the restaurant industry, but beyond that, I'm exclusively at home. You know, and at home with a cat who doesn't really express what he wants to listen to, so I have a lot of freedom. And
that's great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just always a mixed bag. I listen to music constantly, and I
do
mean,
you think the venues return and anything even vaguely resembling the old model comes back in terms of live music?
I know the consensus is no way, but yeah, I can't help but think that, and it might be a few years from now, I do think there's a time when we all go, God, remember that COVID-19 thing? And it's just like
Mhm.
no live music.
Right.
I do think at some point it returns. I'm sure that, in 1918, there were a lot of people who thought the world would never return to normal. I mean, I sincerely hope so. I can't imagine a world where there isn't live music or theater or, just,
And do you see yourself singing in front of people when that returns?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, fuck
I
it.
sometimes wonder whether I'm done. Not out of desire, but
Really?
availability, everything. I mean, there are tiny venues that you'll always be able to kick down the door to and get in, places that will book anybody. But who knows exactly what the demand will be, what venue availability versus artists available is, everything. I mean, it could be, that
Oh, yeah.
a man in his mid-50s may not be a high demand product, after when the smoke clears.
Yeah, no, of course not. Oh, yeah, I in no way was implying that people would actually attend these events where but I have every intention of, like, standing in a room somewhere.
Well, my thing is will I be able to motivate 3 other musicians to do so under different conditions? Because it's been tough. It's been tough enough the last few years anyway. Really, really fulfilling, but not as easy as it was when we were kids.
Oh, yeah, same here. I have to wrangle people from 4 corners of the continent to.
True enough. I remember when I was hearing that it was Reed and it was Balchik. I was like, "Excuse me, a bit of a commute for practice."
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's not easy to pull off, and it's certainly it's not a high profit margin either. But it's infinitely rewarding.
Final subject. Richie Birkenhead is a father. Richie Birkenhead is a family man.
Yeah.
You have been more informed than the average bear most of your life, to my perception. You are an extremely creative person. What are the most familiar aspects of Richie, or the things that most of us who know you through music see that are actually involved in what you try to impart to your children?
A great deal. I mean, I have a daughter who will be 12 in December. I have a son who turned 8 this past July. They're both quite precocious intellectually. They're both, like I was, hypersensitive and hyper creative, and atypical in the best ways. And I just, I'm trying to. I think I'm giving them a very different experience growing up than what I had. I talk often with them very deeply and very honestly about, like, everything about the human condition, about kindness and compassion and pursuing things you love, and and avoiding, and I can definitely fall into despair and cynicism and things that so I try and steer them away from those things. But it's I mean, there's nothing that means more to me, and nothing I've ever felt more deeply than the love I feel for my children and the protectiveness I feel.
It's a level of responsibility that exceeds my understanding. That's why I'm always fascinated to ask people about it in interviews, because it is a world I do not know, and I frankly find intimidating as hell.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the one thing I didn't sign up for, well, I guess I did, because I had to see the writing on the wall, and back in 2008 when Charlotte was born. But I didn't realize we would be this far along on the precipice of, like, you know, the next mass extinction, civil war, autocracy. Like, it's just so many things that are around the corner that are really bad and have really bad implications. And so yeah, it's a really heady time to be bringing up children.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
I would imagine it is. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up there. I got to everything I wanted to get to, and I was thrilled to hear you joke about us replicating Carson for the modern age. So, Richie, thank you so much for doing this, and you will absolutely hear from me again, sir.
Thanks, Dan. That makes me happy. It's always great to have an excuse to see you and speak with you. So,
Likewise, sir.
I appreciate it.